Welcome to Intel on AI, the podcast that connects leaders with listeners. Today's guest is Stacey Shulman. Stacey Shulman is the Vice President and GM of Health, Education, and Consumer Industries at Intel. She leads the charge in growing the Health, Life Sciences, Education, and Consumer Industries unit while exploring emerging technologies across various sectors. With over 25 years in the software and high-tech industry, Stacey's expertise shines in advanced analytics and AI technologies. Before her impactful role at Intel since 2017, she was a technological leader at Levi Strauss & Co. and American Apparel. Her innovative efforts are recognized on the CEO board for the Retail Industry Leaders Association, the X Prize Innovation Board, and through her advisory roles for tech startups, marking significant contributions to tech development and industry standards. Stacey, welcome to Intel on AI.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we have a series of questions, and I'm going to launch right in if you're ready.
I'm ready.
So, from your perspective, what exactly is Agentic AI, and why do you believe it has the potential to reshape industries?
Yeah, so I'm going to give a little bit of background maybe. When I look at AI just as a topic in general, and I've been involved in some form of AI for, we'll call it 30 years, we all have been involved. We've all seen analytics grow and change. And so sometimes people look back and go, what's new? What's new here? We've seen this forever. AI isn't new. And, is it overhyped? So I think part of what's happening in AI is the doubling rate of AI is every 6 months. If you think of that in comparison to Moore's law, which the doubling rate of compute is every 2 years, the doubling rate of AI being every 6 months is just incredible. So that means whatever we have today, 6 months later, we'll have 2 times that. And so I use that to kind of frame up the way I think of anything that's emerging like agentic. Because in 6 months, we might be talking about something different, frankly. But the way I see agents is essentially, taking AI and putting it into different modules that talk to one another and add context to one another. And so I see an agent as a bench of employees that communicate with one another. They go seek out information. They go, with a mission statement. You give an agent a mission statement. What do you want to do? What do you want it to achieve? You give it a task. And to get its task done, it needs to go gather information and needs to gather context from other people, things, agents. And so, where I think of agentic is how do you plug in, an island of geniuses into your business for the cost of electricity, right? And so each of those being agents that need to talk to one another, communicate with one another, collaborate with real humans like myself and you, and collaborate with one another. And so that's the way I think of agentic AI for businesses.
So you oversee industries that directly touch people's lives. How does that human impact influence the way you approach AI strategy?
Yeah, well, I think it brings a lot of seriousness in some ways, in every way. In that one is we need to make sure that AI is being responsible, it's being equitable, and also that we're not inadvertently forcing our customs on other people through the use of AI. It's so easy to think that this is so useful for me, it must be useful in the same way for everyone, right? And it's coming from a good place when people do that, but not everyone has the same customs. Not everyone has the same way of passing information to one another. There are indigenous communities that still pass information to one another verbally and through movement. And so how do we make sure that we're respecting different cultures, different cultural norms? And as we're thinking and building these things out, how do we make sure that we are not creating a divide that's deeper than today's digital divide with the haves and have-nots? So those are the things I think about a lot. I also think a lot about privacy and how do we make sure we preserve privacy, dignity, and all of the things that, should be basic human rights. We can't inadvertently step on human rights in the name of progress. And so as I look at people industries, those are the things I think about first. And then, I start thinking about, well, how can we level the playing field for all? How do we make sure that AI can be used in rural classrooms anywhere in the world? How can we make sure that it's used in forgotten about communities that have been disinvested in for a long time or underinvested? How can we make sure that these technologies are getting into healthcare in a way that's responsible and effective? And so, anyways, I can talk about the people element all day long, but these are the things that I think about.
It's so fascinating, and it's personally an element of AI for me that I've thought about a lot, and I'm really, really excited to be having this conversation with you, because it is that cultural sensitivity that we don't all think the same. So we can't just pull from the same pool of data that exists right now. We have to be making sure that we're including data that is inclusive for the world.
And what a great opportunity and time to do that. I mean, there are indigenous communities where their whole cultural stories are fading away, and we need to capture those. Mm-hmm. So we can preserve this stuff too, the way that we've never been able to do in the past. So I'm kind of excited for that aspect of it. Okay. I promise I'll stop now.
No, this is so great. I love this so much. You brought up healthcare just before this. So trust and accuracy are everything. How can Agentic AI help providers improve patient care without losing the human touch?
Well, I think that if we think of it as an intern, right? So, and we ask that same question, how can a doctor, still provide the same care if they're using an intern? Well, we already know the answer to that, right? You give the intern the proper tasks. That's really the answer. And they are doing those things that free up the doctor to provide more professionalized, personalized care direct with the patient. And so, what are those things? Some examples of those are capturing notes of what's happening in the room with the doctor. I mean, as the doctor is talking to the patient, you can have this intern in the background capturing notes. Because one thing that we do know in talking to different doctors is that they capture the notes after the fact, after you leave the room a lot of times, because they want to be eye to eye with you and they don't want to be heads down typing while they're talking to their patient. And so they capture those notes, but then you're really trusting that they're capturing everything. And a lot of times they only capture what they felt in that moment, what was relevant. And the context of the person's posture, how they were feeling, things that they may not have said, the fact that they had sniffles while they were talking, or they sounded congested. All of those things are actually clues that could then be leveraged later in a different diagnosis. And so doctors have told us, so we just don't have time to capture all of that context. And we love the fact that something is there capturing it and cataloging it so that we can then leverage it at another time. So those are some examples, I think, for doctors. The intention is to get them back to the human touch so that they're not distracted with the screens in front of them, and to have something in the background in an ambient way that's just capturing that conversation and that dialogue to catalog the information that will be relevant down the road.
Can you share an example of how AI is helping healthcare systems go beyond that type of efficiency towards actual transformation in diagnosis, treatment, or patient experience?
Yeah, I think we're seeing this more in the life sciences space than anywhere. I'm really excited about that space. We're seeing AI be used for being able to take and discover new drugs entirely, and understand not just the new drug, but what other drug is really similar to it that have already gone through safety trials, and what's the likely outcome? What kind of population do you need for clinical trials? How do you make sure that you're representing the whole population properly. I won't go on a side note, but women were not included in clinical trials until recently. And so, the efficacy with medications for women was so much lower because they just weren't included. And so to have AI basically say, oh, remember this population. And then also remember, populations that may react differently because of their genetics. And so, I'm seeing a lot with that in the life sciences space, a lot of discovery, a lot of acceleration of getting drugs to market. There are drugs that cure some cancers that we won't see for 10 to 15 years in the current process if we do not use AI. So that's an area that I'm pretty excited about the transformation.
So beyond agentic AI, technologies like acoustic AI are emerging in healthcare. How do you see these different AI approaches working together to solve real-world medical challenges?
I think this is where agents come in. Right? Is that if you have something that is just plugged into anything new that comes in, right? And its job is data collection. I'm going to go gather context, not just data, but context. I'm going to go gather data, context, and insights and information. So whether you're using acoustics or ambient or, whatever's coming up next, right? And, again, 6 months, we'll be talking about something new. But I think of that as, if you think of agents as that framework that can plug into all of those new things to gather information, then I see that as being the thing that kind of ties stuff together and starts making all of these things work together. So, without getting into real specifics on, this specific, medical application to it, which I'm trying to stay away from a little bit, but, I'm not an expert at that, so I'll stay out of that. But I do think that we have to get out of this thinking of, is it this AI or this AI? In thinking of these things as competitive, but thinking of the plus sign. So it's this AI plus this AI. It's machine learning. We'll go back to machine learning, who's been a stable AI, tool for many years. It's still relevant. So there are things that machine learning is super, relevant for. That will work. As we start seeing more LLMs and, things, that's relevant for certain things. Computer vision is still relevant. Machine vision is relevant. All of these things tying together and working together is, I think, the goal is what I see, and an imperative for companies to really start thinking about flexible infrastructure that will allow that to happen.
And what are some of the biggest barriers or risks that you see for healthcare leaders as they integrate advanced AI systems? How could those be mitigated?
Yeah, I think that the biggest risk is, there's a couple things. I think the biggest risk is change management, quite frankly, in the healthcare system. And I'll say there's a difference. U.S. healthcare system, very different. Well, U.S. and China healthcare system, different. And then you get into other parts of Southeast Asia, and we're talking about countries where they haven't digitized their healthcare records yet. And so totally different problem there. But all of those, what's common is the change management aspects of it. Is how do you build trust with doctors who are very, protective of their patients, as we want them to be, right? So they're reluctant to take on any kind of risk for their patients. So if they see AI as a risk, they're not going to bring it into their hospital room. And so we've got a lot of work to do as a community to make sure that doctors understand that it's safe. And then the second barrier is, okay, it's safe, but is it effective? What's the efficacy of this algorithm that you just put in front of me? And we saw examples of sepsis algorithms that got out into hospitals that just didn't work. I mean, you could have had, a random spin of a wheel and been more accurate than that sepsis algorithm was. So yeah, it didn't hurt anybody, but it didn't help at all. And it was a complete distraction. And so those are the types of things that I think we've got to start looking at on solving that. When we get beyond the change management, then we get into like just the work itself. How do you get this stuff implemented into your systems? And how do what do you start with? And I think that's where a lot of people are at now, is that they're kind of starting with a little bit of whatever's easy. I think this is why we see AI for PowerPoint presentations and music videos and cat videos. It's, it's just easy. Well, it's also delightful, but
they're great cat videos.
Yeah, it's really good. It's fun. But, when we start getting beyond that, like what does it really take to make it integrated into a business? That change management and the speed of that is unlike anything we've seen, and unlike anything I've seen in my career. And so I think that's going to be a bigger challenge than we all think.
I want to move on to the education sector. So that's always been about personalized learning. How could Agentic AI finally make that scalable and accessible?
Yeah, so I have a bias in this area, and my bias is for the educator. Because I think we forget about the educator too much. Yes, we need to focus on the student, and yes, they need tools, but the best way to learn is through collaboration and to make sure that you have the right mediator, the right educator in that conversation with these students, teaching them. And what's happening right now in the classroom is the students have better tools than the educator. And so that's something that I actually think new AI tools can really help with, is as we start digitizing the classroom, which we need to do, and providing better digital tools to the educator. Now they can have tools that, go through and listen again in the background on what did you cover? What did you not cover? What was the uptake of that? Were students engaged? Were they catching on? Do you need to recover this section in your class? What do you need to double down on? AI right now, we've done this in other parts of the world, and we have AI working in over 1 million classrooms doing exactly that. And it works quite well. Students out on recess, the teacher's lesson plan is being recalculated and shared with, here's some points you need to recover for these students so that they can really, hone in on that topic better. And so those are some examples of what I think can be done in the education side.
Yeah. I think back to our earlier conversation about sort of cultural relevance along with that type of teaching, and sort of what are the country's values? What are they instilling? What's the history that's being brought? And so how do we make sure that we stay sort of culturally appropriate, as well as having this universal technology? So,
Agreed.
Asking about AI tutors and adaptive learning platforms, what do you think the next wave of AI-powered education will be?
Yeah, I have seen a lot in this space. I would say I'm betting on, there being a more personalized way of learning for students in those tutors. But not every student's the same. So I'll, start there. Some require face-to-face learning and more hands-on learning. But there are those students that want to work at their own pace. And, I was one of those students that just preferred to try to do it on my own first, learn the hard way, and then go ask where I needed. And so I think those types of learning styles will flourish under, these personalized ways of learning with AI tutors. And then, again, to not forget about other types of learners, I think these AI tutors will then be able to help identify areas where somebody needs to be more hands-on, and then create a prescription for them, if you will, on try learning it this way. Try it. Here's an exercise you can do that you can help, go learn this. And we've connected you with 2 other learners in your school that learn the same way. Here's an exercise the 3 of you can do together. And so that would be an example of where I see some of these more personalized, learning experiences for students.
I'm going to move on now to the consumer space. So how do you see Agentic AI changing the way brands engage with customers?
Yeah, I've seen, and I will say this is a space I actually think is moving faster than others, which is rare that retail moves faster than some other industries. But But the retailers that I've worked with and talked to, they've started working on this in their brands a couple of years ago, and a lot of them have had some very successful tests. So some examples that I've seen work really well is when agents were used for the sales associate. So it was not like a customer comes in and they're using agents. The sales associate was using the agent to be able to prompt them on what to say, how to say it, what questions, how to answer a question when a customer came in and asked a question. And the goal there was we were asking the question of, can you get this new sales associate to behave and perform at the same rate as one of your tenured employees? Because with turnover rates being so high in retail, most of the time when a customer comes in, they know more about the product than the employee. And so the goal is like, let's make sure that that employee can answer questions for that customer in the way that a seasoned employee would. The tests on that in one of the retailers was phenomenal. They actually did perform like a 15-year employee within the first, we'll call it 6 months. It was less than that, but 6 months to onboard an employee, get them, performing like a 15-year seasoned employee with the enthusiasm and newness of a new employee. Right. And so that was something that worked out really well. And then we're also seeing agents with, just being able to guide a customer through their shopping journey, online primarily. But as they're in the store, to be able to chat real time with the agent and ask it questions as though you have a personal stylist in your pocket is something that is also really good. And I'm seeing that really take off.
Amazing. I want to try that. I never know what to wear. I would love if I could have a certain style or vibe of an agent to kind of go where you go, I want to look like effortless, but structured. And then they go like, go over here, pick those pants, put that shirt with this. Here's your outfit.
Yeah. And it tells you what's in the store, right? It's like, oh, here's a great outfit. Well, I can't buy that because I can't find that anywhere. Yeah. So thank you for now spoiling what I want. Yeah. I want that because I can't have it.
When it comes to customer experience, how can companies strike that balance between AI automation and genuine human interaction?
Yeah, I think that that is something that everyone's struggling with right now, of course, because what is the balance? And I think that it's also different. We're seeing behaviors of the shopper really not wanting that in balance. They're perfectly fine with the answer in their pocket, and the agent there on their phone, and they're very comfortable chatting with, ChatGPT or, Claude or Gemini, whichever one they're choosing. They're very comfortable chatting with the buddy in their pocket. And so that they may not want an associate to jump in the middle of that. And so that is, one type of shopper. There's another type of shopper that will never use an agent willingly. And so they really want human behavior. They really want that connection, and they want that socialization that, that you can only get from in-store shopping. And so, I think that, the answer is not going to be a one size fits all for brands. It's going to be like, what's your brand? Who is your customer? Do you understand your customer well enough? And then what optionality do you want to give for that customer base? And then getting your associates trained on that, hopefully accelerating that training with the use of AI, but getting them trained on if you see these signals, you hear this kind of, this body language, this is what you do. And, so that's one thing that I think, we're going to see kind of evolve over time. Like we're just, as retail's understanding omni-channel, right? I mean, that just became a thing that we got our arms around. And so with this next wave of new ways of doing things, it's going to be another learning journey. So I'm excited to watch how this unfolds.
Amazing. I'm going to scale back now to talk about the enterprises. So for enterprises navigating both the opportunities and challenges of AI adoption, what makes Intel's technology and approach the right foundation for success?
Yeah. So I look at AI, and the thing that I really believe is that you can't have two parallel universes. You can't have your AI systems and then everything else, your operational systems. You can't have parallel systems that run together. They have to be merged. AI needs to be in everything that you do. It needs to be in every system you have, from your cell phone all the way to your back end server. And so I think if you look at where Intel is unique in this, is that we're in everything, whether you like it or not. We're kind of there, right? Okay, not in a creepy way, but we're in all the things that we're trusted. We've been there for a long time. I mean, we've been in the things that people use in enterprise for 50 years. And so we know enterprise, like that is our space. And so what we're talking about isn't like this new thing that we've got to do with AI. We've got to incorporate AI into the things that we've been doing for a long time. And so I think we're uniquely positioned for that, not just in our technology, but if you look at our vast ecosystem, it's not us that's everywhere. It's our partners that are everywhere. Our partners have been writing point of sale products for years. When people, transitioned from, cash aprons into a digital point of sale, that was us that was in that with our partner ecosystem. And so now we understand how AI needs to go into that thing. And we have those solutions and have had those solutions for a long time. So I think the narrative is a little bit out of skew on the AI talk, because it's being treated like this brand new thing that requires brand new hardware in a brand new way. And my position is that that's not sustainable. You have to be able to leverage the assets that you have in place today and do more with them. And so I think when we look at the Intel story, that is our story. And that's what we do really well. And so, we would love to be part of that other story too, of all those new things. Who wouldn't love to be part of that? But when you look at where we are really strong, we're strong in the ways that enterprise needs strength. And that is run your systems with security, stability, and reliability, and then make sure that you're future-proofed so that you can continue with new things that come in and you can continue leveraging that investment for many, many years. So I'm proud of the company for always being there, right?
Intel often talks about combining hardware, software, and ecosystem partnerships to drive AI innovation. How does this integrated approach accelerate real-world impact in your focus industries?
Yeah, I mean, I think it still comes back to that whole story with the ecosystem. Is when you look at any kind of emerging technology, the thing that slows it down is there's not enough people in the ecosystem to take it forward. It's either one company trying to do it all themselves, which will not scale, or it's a smattering of really small companies doing their best. But what Intel brings in is we bring in a depth of ecosystem that has all of it, down from the operating system vendors, to the companies that build boxes, to the companies that build boards, companies that build software on top of those operating systems, the peripheral companies that plug into those systems. We're in all of those. And when things come up in emerging technology, whether it's AI or anything, we have to go deeply understand that thing and bring the whole ecosystem along and get them aligned, which is massive, frankly. Getting a camera vendor to talk to a cash drawer vendor in the retail space, and making sure that all those things work together harmoniously. That's something that's, I'd say, uniquely Intel.
So I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Looking ahead 5 to 10 years beyond agentic AI and whatever other AI advancements are powered by Intel technology, could most profoundly improve everyday life across health, education, and consumer sectors?
Ooh, yeah, I mean, that's like, if I had that, I'd be really killing it in the stock market right now. So It's hard to call. I mean, this is a tough one because, again, when I mentioned earlier that the doubling rate of AI is every 6 months, it's growing faster than our imaginations can keep up with. It's growing faster than we can think through use cases. It's growing faster than regulatory bodies can regulate it, right? So the growth of it is so fast that, I don't know that too many people can predict 3 years out or 5 years out. What I can predict is that in 5 years, it will be something that none of us thought was possible. I mean, that I feel is true. So we have to kind of prepare for this inevitability. But when we kind of come back to where I think, the greatest impact on humanity is going to be with AI, again, my bias, I'm going to say, in the life sciences space is going to be huge, and in the education space, because we've underinvested in education in almost every country that I've looked at, and I've looked at most of them now. We've underinvested in education, specifically in rural communities, for a long time. And so I think if AI can help level the playing field there through, different tools that are more accessible, that can have a profound impact on this population of students that are our next wave of innovators. And so I believe that if you want innovation to be able to go to Mars or to, expand our reach out there, you've got to make sure that the people who will be doing that are educated properly and ready for it. And so I believe that that's one of the biggest impacts in the life sciences space. Look, we're finding ways to, cure things that no one thought was curable. Life sciences space is starting to treat aging as a disease and not as an inevitability. And so when we start looking at what AI can do in that space, I think it's going to elongate how many healthy years people live, right? And so not just their life, but their healthy years in life, which is the important part. And it's going to get really good quality, high quality concierge style medicine out into the rural communities where, again, people have a hard time getting care. And so when I look at like the ways that people are going to change, I, am an optimist about AI and think that it's going to help, again, it's going to get into communities that have been forgotten about in a way that's accessible. So that's my hope. Part of it is just me putting it out there is, what's going to happen because I really want it to happen. And that's where I'd say a lot of my energies go.
I get the feeling you're the person that's going to make it happen.
Well, see, this is a good thing about having an ecosystem, right? And a community is that the community will make it happen. And, we need to find our people in those communities to really push it forward.
I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm a little bit in awe of you. I gotta say, maybe I'm blushing, maybe I'm wearing a sweater. I don't know. I think you're quite remarkable, and I know that you're so busy. And I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So for everybody, watching, this was Stacey Shulman from Intel. My name is Heather McGuigan. This was Intel on AI, and thank you for watching. Bye.
Visit intel.com/AI to learn more.